Thanks for tuning in to this special crossover between Howe's Things and
This Endorian Life, a nostalgic Star Wars podcast from the Radio Meanwhile Network. My name is Steve Rudd.
And I'm Amanda Smith from the David A. Howe Library.
I'm Nick Gunning from both, and today we are heading to the library for our annual Star Wars Day book club. So let's open up our books and see where our bookmarks are at.
This year, we will be discussing the Medstar Duology by Michael Reaves and Steve Perry.
That is correct. The Medstar series consists of Battle Surgeons, which came out in paperback on June 29th, 2004. After that, there was a short story interlude called Intermezzo, which was published in Star Wars Insider number 83. It's a short that takes place in between the books. And then finally, Jedi Healer, which came out in paperback on September 28th, 2004. The novel covers were illustrated by Dan Seeley, while art for Intermezzo was done by Randy Martinez. Guys, I think that we're going to be coming at this from an interesting trajectory because these books are 20 years old, 20 plus. They've existed as long as Steve has played the cello and an extra decade. So I remember getting these when they came out, and I read them, and I've loved them. And on library podcasts in the past, when we're talking about favorite Star Wars or favorite Star Wars prequels in particular, I'm always like, oh, Battle Surgeons. I love those Medstar books. I never reread them. And so I did the abridged audio to refresh on them, and I have some thoughts on that. But guys, let's hear your history. Amanda, what about you? What's your history with these books?
So I got these in my teenage years when I went through a phase of we would go to Barnes and Nobles and immediately the sci-fi section was the place to be. Where they had all of the Star Wars books and all the paperback ones. And so with the Clone Wars newly becoming a thing, it was a great section to kind of dive in. And particularly because Barriss was, I think she made a very brief appearance in Attack of the Clones, but then you didn't get any of her story or anything.
Barriss Offee, the Jedi Padawan from this book.
Yeah, so being able to kind of have that connection and explore a new character was really intriguing. And just the aspect also of kind of investigating it from an angle of a bit more focused on the surgeon's viewpoint.
Yeah.
And integrating her into the mix and what's it look like on the ground in the midst of a wartime experience. So, yeah, just a lot of intriguing thematic elements, and being able to explore that was really cool.
Yeah. So you read them a decade plus ago, and then to revisit them, what did you do? Did you read them all over again?
I did.
Okay. And Steve, I know because I could sense some attitude from you in our previous episodes, but tell the nice people your experience with these books. Did you read them back in the day? Are you discovering them for the first time? What's your history?
I had never read them nor heard of them in my life.
In your whole life.
Ooh, brand new experience.
Yes. One of the things, too, is I was never really excited about any Clone Wars content back in the day. Even when the Clone Wars came out, I was like, I was still kind of a prequels hater.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't know. But I bought them on eBay from a seller, and I started it. And then realized I was going super slow and found out that it was actually on audiobook. And so I finished the first book on audiobook and the full second book on audiobook. And abridged is an understatement.
Yeah.
If you wheeled somebody in and it was basically a leg, 2 arms, and like a nose, and you were like, it's a human, I'd be like, what?
Yeah. And honestly, a lot of that happens in the unabridged version of this. There's a lot of body parts flying around that you don't get in the abridged audio. So, yeah, it's a bad abridgment. I think, we just got to get that right off the table. Sometimes it works, and this was like Star Trek, Star Wars, any genre fiction, X-Files books, whatever. If they went to audio at all, 90% of the time it was an abridged version, oftentimes with like sound effects or like actors from the series that they were on or whatever. But this was like the only way to get these on audio. And while a lot of this content from this time, particularly Star Wars, has seen new expanded unabridged audios, these books in audio exist only in the abridgment. And I really felt like the abridgments cut out a lot of the meat, not just like
it's only
not just the
300
color.
pages.
Yeah.
There should be like a unwritten rule of like, if it's under 300 pages, why abridge?
Oh yeah.
I think it's logistical. I think given the time that they were coming out, particularly the Star Trek ones, they would be like, how much can we fit on a cassette tape? Well, that's how long the abridgment's going to
Oh
be.
yeah.
Makes
You
sense.
know,
Yeah.
like these were often 2 cassettes, and then when CDs rolled around, it was often 2 CDs, and like anything more than that, I think just the dollars and cents didn't shake out. So I think it really was the amount of time was based on capacity of whatever like dated media they were using. But it's going to be an interesting conversation then if those are the ones that are in your head, because they're rough.
There's going to be a lot of stuff I get wrong.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest.
Quick disclaimer.
So as Amanda mentioned, Barriss Offee, she's the Jedi Padawan who really, Amanda, she made her debut in The Approaching Storm, which you and I read a few years back for a Star Wars Day Book Club. Like she was in that before she was in the movie. And then the character was expanded and goes in interesting directions in the Clone Wars cartoon.
True.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't Barriss Offee one of the Jedi that goes to the dark side? Doesn't she?
You may be onto something, Steve.
I think she does.
You may be onto something.
I mean, it's kind of alluded to in this.
I know, it's true. It's true. They toy with it.
That's true.
The Republic surgeons that we have, Joss Vondar, Tolk Latrine, Chloe Merritt, Zan Yant. Then we have the droid I-5YQ. He is looking for Jax Pavan, who's the central character in the Coruscant Nights trilogy. The Coruscant Nights trilogy is written by the same authors and come right after this. And Den and I-5, Den Dur is the reporter that we see in this story. Den and I-5 mention having to find Jax Pavan, and that continues in the Coruscant Nights trilogy. I didn't realize how closely those were connected, and I haven't read that, so now I
haven't either.
Kind of want to because I love
same authors.
Same authors, Michael Reaves, Steve Perry. Yep. Which brings us to our featured cast member, and that is going to be Michael Reaves himself. So as we've discussed in the past, Michael Reaves is the author of several Star Wars novels from the 2000s, including Darth Maul Shadowhunter, the Coruscant Nights trilogy. But his history with Star Wars goes back much farther because he wrote the 1985 Droids episode, Tale of the Rune Comet, as well as the Ewok episodes, Hard Sell and The Raish.
The Raish, yeah.
Yeah. The Raish is maybe the best episode of Ewoks.
Yeah.
It was right up there. And at the time, we were like, oh, yeah. So, yeah, Steve and I have already covered some works by this author. Not his best work, but works nonetheless.
Yeah.
I do love that it seems like each episode that we have somehow, even if the book doesn't correlate to even the timeline of the Ewoks coming into play, somehow you're able to be like, by the way, track out with me, I can make this connection.
Mm-hmm. Amanda, you're getting dangerously close to my Ichiwawa moment, so I'm going to have to stop you right there because there's a great deep cut that we have to talk about when we get to it. But Steve, why don't you hit us with the publisher's summary for the Medstar Duology?
All right, let's go to uber detailed publisher's summary.
Yes.
The galaxy-wide civil war between the Republic and the Separatists is a war fought on 1,000 fronts with heroism and sacrifices on both sides. But nowhere is fighting more fierce than on the fetid swamp of Drongar, where a ragtag military medical unit wages a never-ending war of its own. Jedi Padawan Barriss Offee and Chief Surgeon Josh Vondar are two of a handful of Republic medics on Drongar, where battle rages over the control of Boda, a priceless plant that can be found nowhere else in the galaxy. The pace is brutal, and an endless line of medlifters brings in wounded and dying, mostly clone troopers, but also soldiers of other species. And the conditions are nearly impossible as both organic healers and medical droids battle soaring temperatures and humidity, monsoons with devastating electrical storms, pestilential life forms, and constant technical malfunctions to save lives. For Joss Vondar, a wisecracking surgeon who sees clones as interchangeable body parts, droids as simple machines, and attractive Luridian nurses as socially unsuitable for romance, Drongar will become a theater for love, grief, epiphany, and treachery. For Barriss Offee, a Jedi in training whose primary mandate is to augment the doctors and surgeons, but also to make sure the Boda is harvested, packed, and shipped correctly. Drongar will be her trial by fire, the test that will determine whether or not she has what it takes to be a Jedi Knight. But while the healers desperately cope with both personal and medical crises, others plot to profit from the chaos, either by dealing Boda on the black market or by manipulating the events of the war itself. Roll credits.
Okay. Let's just get out with it right now. What's the general consensus on this? Are we thumbs up? Are we thumbs down? I just want all cards on the table.
I'm still a thumbs up.
Same. Stevie Wonder, what do you got?
So because of the abridgment, which I knew this was going to be a thing, I one thumb up. I don't know, man. I hate it when there's books where there's so many things going on. And I say that, of course, and I've read Game of Thrones, which is the stupidest thing to say. I think the issues that I had right off the bat, that if Boda was one of the rarest and most cherished things in the galaxy, why did they have the butt end of resources on both the Separatist and the Republic? It was like they couldn't get medical resources, even though they were on a planet where Boda could be used as the most miracle drug ever. Like, for some reason, we're not allowed to use it. And it was like both the Separatists and the Republic were struggling to keep hold of it. And it's like, I immediately thought of, like, I don't know, Dune, right? Arrakis, where the Atreides family had to move their entire planet basically to Dune, their whole army and everything, to occupy it, right? And it was like, because the spice was that important. So it would be like, it just, I don't know. To me, it was just like, this seems really weird. Like, I get the whole, like, butt end of the galaxy and stuff like that, but that was just strange to me, and I couldn't get that out of my mind. I didn't like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
As you were talking, Steve, it kind of hit me. I was like, yeah, you know what? Even though they had this consistent ground battle going on, you never really hear anything about any kind of space battle. It's just this, well, the Republic's over here and the Federation's over there.
That's what I thought.
Never the two shall meet. But I hadn't thought of that until you were like, I don't get it. Why aren't there more resources being applied here?
They're just parked on the other side of the planet, and just like, okay,
it's fine.
Like, what?
We have a peace treaty in space, but not on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, there's like real world parallels when you think about like the eternal battle for oil and things like that.
Right.
Where
yeah.
It's not like top tier people that are like moving there to get the oil, you know what I mean? But still, that is a major thing that, everything relies on. So
major commodity,
do feel like, exactly. So I do feel like there's some real world parallels for that. I thought the added step of, they're all the ones who are on the front lines risking their life to harvest this Boda, but nobody is allowed to use it to repair the troops who are like on the ground. I know, but it felt real to me. I feel like that's the way that it would be.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I guess I see what you're saying. Yeah, where it's like, yep, you're not allowed to use it. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. You're good enough to,
highly prized resources.
Yes, exactly.
Protect it with your life.
Yep. You're good enough to die for it, but not worthy enough to like benefit from it.
That does make sense.
Save, you are expendable.
Yeah. I read an article, I think it was with Michael Reaves, and they were talking about it, and they were really looking at the battle surgeons part of it. They were taking a lot of cues from like the Korean War, and particularly like thinking about MASH, like MASH, but Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like that was really like the ground level that they wanted to focus on. So like all of the things that are kind of piled on top of that are kind of like set dressing to tell this very small tale about, like Steve said, is the back end tiny little corner of the galaxy. Like we can't even assign like a full Jedi. You know what I mean? Here's just a little student and a bunch of clones and just like Godspeed, So I like that about it. And I think it kind of fits with the Clone Wars show, where it's like, look at this little corner for one episode and look at this corner for one little episode. I like adding a little bit of weight to that. And especially like down the road when you see what happens to Barriss, it's a kind of a linchpin of a story, like getting you to her eventual fate. So I think it still holds up, but there are so many things happening because we have, Black Sun involved, we have a spy, a double agent, we have a killer on the loose, we have romance, we have the battle for resources, we have Barriss trying to like level up as a Jedi, like while sort of fighting darker impulses. There's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's in some ways trying to really highlight the chaos of war in some ways.
Yeah.
Or that just the war affected everyone, right?
Yeah.
Everyone had some part of it. Didn't the war never? Yeah, I feel like they said even a line like that like that nothing, no part of the galaxy was left untouched by the war or something.
Yeah.
I think what the abridgment again. I mean, this is just how I felt. Like they cut out most of the surgeon stuff.
Oh.
Yes.
So like my criticism like would be like, yeah, there was really like no Jedi healing.
I can vouch for this. This was confusing about the audiobook. And honestly, I think your takedown of the audiobook is kind of valuable because so many people, like audiobook is kind of king right now, so many people are going to see this and listen to the audiobook and not realize that like so
they're going to be disappointed. Yeah.
Because
yeah.
Amanda, I particularly enjoyed I think what Steve was missing here was I really liked the medical side of it, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I appreciated that take because I think that so often, whether it's in one of the shows or in one of the books, there's kind of this skirt over of the fallout of what happens during what, like you might see somebody go down, but you never really track out and find out what happened to them, except maybe like this, oh, that's a sad moment. But now moving on back to the Jedi being in their glory days, so to speak. But yeah, it got a bit more gritty in that kind of focal point, which I did appreciate.
Yeah, because it was relentless. I mean, they just were constantly like a new wave of injured troops coming in. And then there's this whole ethical thing where it's like, well, they're all perfect matches for each other. So it's like this person's, maybe could live, but this person would be fine if they had a working heart. And so it's like, do we kind of...
I caught some of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good aspect.
Yeah, those dilemmas I think were really interesting, and the way that they would try to kind of make sure that they were keeping the fact that like these are living people, like these are like yes they are clones, but like they had specific relationships with some, and the way that the doctors had to sort of remember like this is not just a factory anymore. I mean, these are living people with unique experiences now, and like we have to remember that as we try to put together as best we can. But the relentlessness of that I thought was good. It keeps the pace of the books flowing strong. I like the romance, Josh and Tal.
Yeah, I did appreciate that element being folded into the story as well. And I thought it was interesting too that he's from Corellia, and it just kind of reminded me of the Han and Leia story.
Yep.
And just the unfolding of that, and how there's no mention of any kind of, well, sorry, you're an extra. I can't associate with you. There's no possibility of any kind of relationship. So I kind of appreciated that slow unfolding and development of relationship. And it was interesting too because of her unique capability of being able to read the emotions of an individual really well, and how like she could have taken that and really manipulated it, which there was some elements of that to a degree, but nothing that was like really awful in her character. So it kind of showcased some of the depth of her character.
Yeah.
But to touch really quick on the element that you talked about of just that nonstop pacing, as I was reading the books, I was thinking about how it sort of felt like one of the first times that they really explored the clones as people.
Yeah,
when,
I agree.
When they were first introduced in the movies and such, all you have is this humanoid figure with a helmet on and no real idea of who's underneath, what kind of person that they might be. So it removes an aspect of the humanity, but it's really depicted here, which I appreciated, and it's more developed too with Dross's grappling with his immediate ideals about them. That was really cool. I appreciated that unfolding.
Yeah, I think again what is lost in the abridgment too is the depth of the relationships between, well, among all the characters really. I mean, you have the friendship between Jas and Zan, which is kind of that's a turning point. That's kind of the break between the book where Zan's murder. Did you guys read Intermezzo, the short story that's set in between?
I did. Yeah.
It was, it's not very long. It's small. And it kind of felt like maybe this was an excised chapter from the book itself, and they were like, hey, let's release it as a short story. I mean, that's happened many a times, but really it's just a simple story about Joss coming to terms with Zan's death and like grappling again with his own morality and like what it means to be a doctor and how he has to like, you know, like he's put in a position where like he could sort of exact some sense of vengeance, and he's got to overcome that in this short story. So I think it is worth a read. It's readily available online. It's not hard to find. So take a look at that. But I thought that added a nice little, I mean, it worked. I mean, it's called Intermezzo, and that's kind of what it feels like. It's just this little interlude where the characters kind of breathe for a minute and have time to process their emotions, and then boom, it's right back into it.
Yeah, it gives sort of a different exploration of humanity, not just in terms of like the clones being fleshed out a bit, but kind of the exploration of who are you as a person in the midst of wartime, and what are you going to do with your skill set and abilities, and how is war going to change you, etc.
You know, I haven't read a ton of things with Black Sun, and Black Sun is sort of this presence throughout these books. Have you guys read any of the books that really like deal with Black Sun?
I did one, I think it's called Heir to the Empire. It's about Prince Zeiser and
Shadows of the Emperor. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Okay,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, yeah, I have read that.
That's the one. It's that like right before, right around the time that Han is put in carbonite and they're trying to develop a plan to go and save him, and somehow I don't even remember, it's been several years, but they somehow get entangled with Black Sun and Leia gets captured.
There it is. Steve's got it.
Yeah.
Prince Zeiser is somehow trying to like win her over in some capacity.
Oh yeah, Steve Perry. Yeah, it's by Steve Perry.
All right, so Shadow of the Empire is by Steve Perry. So we're pulling in kind of the same Black Sun angle in both of these books. So that's interesting. That's an interesting connection there. Steve, even with the hindrance of the abridgment, were there things that clicked for you in this?
I do like what you brought up about the whole one thing after another, that it was kind of like, oh yeah, my shift's over and somebody's washing their hands, and then they're like, oh, you're knocking off? Yeah, I'm knocking off. And then all of a sudden the sirens happen. It had that MASH feel to it,
which was very intentional, as it turns out.
Yeah, I did like that. At first, I thought it was a little annoying. What's his name's? The reporter.
Oh, Den.
Yeah, Dender. Like, I learned to like his character because I felt like it was a necessary addition, but it was just too convenient that like you're sent to this like butt end of the galaxy, and there happens to be a large Black Sun plot. The Boda, like the keeping the secret of the Bodas basically running out, you know, so everyone's dying over something that's just going to, or not run out, but the climate was going to change, so then the Boda was going to be useless, and like things like that. That like when I realized it, I was like, oh yeah, his character is necessary, and then I was like, that's too convenient though.
It's almost like his job isn't able to be carried out, and he's just basically used as a plot driver. They're like, we need you, but not for your actual job of being a journalist. We just need you to drive this story, which I feel kind of bad, because I was like, you always have these stories that are either twisted or you have a conscience, which is great. And you're like, shoot, I can't push this.
He held everyone together in a way, I think. Like almost everyone had an association with him. He was that character that just kind of was like everywhere. You know, he had the conversations with everyone.
That's true.
I ended up liking him. Okay, so this was one of my biggest, Amanda, we brought this up with like other things that we've done with Star Wars. The audiobooks or the abridged, this did not feel like Star Wars at all.
Really?
It did not feel like Star Wars. Yeah, there was almost no jet. I mean, I think I read up to the point at least where Barriss attacked that super battle droid. And then after that, I think that was about halfway, maybe a little more halfway through or something that happened. After that, everything else was abridged audiobook. So like there was no Jedi things. The clone trooper stuff could have just been just any trooper. In the audiobook. It just wasn't significant to. I didn't get all that. Like all of the ethical stuff. They just kind of it came up in one spot, and then after that, it was. You know, there was the whole like, oh well, that guy's alive, and that guy's gonna die, but he's not dead yet. You know, there was like that whatever that situation was in the book that was touched on, and then that was basically it. After that, it was basically a boiled down version of anything, and so it really stripped the feel of Star Wars out of it.
So it was a very generic kind of sci-fi.
Yes, it was a
story,
sci-fi
please.
story with just like Star Wars stuff and Star Wars noises, but like the med lifters could have just been any med lifter. There was basically
Right.
no presence of the separatists or Republic as they were. It was just the troopers, the clones, and so it was like, and even Barriss Offee, there was her conflict with like basically getting high off the Boda. But I remember thinking, I was just like, weird. This is Medstar book. There's almost no healing. At least in the second book, it felt like it. There was no healing. there was almost no like real battles. There wasn't any battles anymore. It focused on all kinds of weird things. It just was. It felt to me like I couldn't figure out who the story was about. Was it Joss? Is it Joss the story? Is it about everyone? There was a lot of Dender stuff in the audiobook, and probably because his character carries, the common theme of what was happening on Drongard at the time, right? So like his character kind of touched and had a part in everybody's character. So he was heavily focused on in the audiobooks, but like it was almost a mistake that I read half of the first book because there were plot lines that were opened that just never got resolved because the audiobook probably never even brought them up in the first place. And so like for me, I was just like, whoa, that was a lot of criticism was like, man, it felt like it started strong and then ended really bad. And it's because I read it to begin with.
I think that they are particularly books that do not lend themselves well to an abridgment, which, honestly, some do.
Yeah.
If this was kind of like a, if there was like a real primary character and that person's story was the one and only thing that you were following, and there was a little bit of, seasoning around that, but at the end of the day, you're learning about this one person, then it could kind of work. But I think with something like this where, because I feel like I disagree with just about everything you said, and I think that's because of the different, respectfully, but I think because of the different ways, like
I knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen.
Amanda, I'm curious to know what you think about the ensemble nature of it, because that, for me, like personally, often that's a hard sell when I don't feel like this is the person that I'm following. I like a strong central character in a book like this. And this is kind of a rare exception where I was really into the ensemble of it all. How did you feel about that?
So I was thinking about that a little bit in connection with the High Republic books that we read.
I try not to think about that.
And just that's fair. But I know in that regard they were trying to do an ensemble setup, but I felt like this kind of showcased a stark contrast between the two, where for that one, it was so broad and there was not a singular character that I felt like I could even connect with well enough to be like, okay, I feel a bit grounded. So normally I would also agree that I prefer a singular character to be the grounding point so I can kind of follow them through. But I felt like they did it well enough in this context that I didn't feel unmoored throughout the story and being like, oh my gosh, I don't know where I am. I don't know what's happening. I was able to follow it well, and it was a good setup, and it gave you a bit more scope on what was going on throughout the story without losing that thread of going forward. And I guess one of the other things that came to mind was, since it's based on MASH, I know that MASH was a book, I think, before they did the show and the movie feature.
Horrible book.
I was going to ask if either of you have read it, and was it any good?
No, it's the thing about the novel MASH is that it's like very mean-spirited. Like Hawkeye in the novel is an unpleasant, unlikable character. Like the pranks are out of hand. He's just an ass. Like it's really not. I was very disappointed by the book. Very different from the TV show, and I haven't seen the movie, so who knows if it's a little bit more true to that. But
was that an ensemble setup?
Yeah. The book also reads a little bit more like individual short stories about characters. It's like each chapter sort of feels like its own little thing, and Hawkeye probably is the most primary. But I think Joss here was meant to be
The Hawkeye.
I don't think it's supposed to be a one-for-one comparison, but I would say Joss is probably like the Hawkeye in that.
Yeah.
And if I had to say who the main character was, I think that I would probably say Joss.
Yeah.
You know, because he like really went through it,
Even
and
though
because
Barris is on the front.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think either way. I mean, I guess they're kind of co-leads, but I feel like maybe because Barris's story goes on and Joss's, for all intents and purposes, doesn't, because
Right.
you know the book ends, and so I think you get more of a full circle on him.
Yeah.
But to Steve's other point that I disagree with,
Full circle.
I was impressed both the first time I read it and even with the hindrance of the audio, that it did feel like to me we were staying true to Star Wars while not having. I mean, to all your other points, Steve, you're right. I mean, there's not a lot of Jedi action. You're right that the troopers could just be any platoon. But I think something about the world really maintained a Star Wars feel, and it was just like you're watching this weird little subset play out while the Star Wars of it all is happening over here. I just fully felt immersed in like the Star Wars world and was delighted in seeing sort of a behind the curtains. To Amanda's earlier point, this is stuff that you never hear about. You see the clones, they fall, we move on, that's it. And I liked digging in a little deeper on it. So
Yeah.
It's sort of like, do you guys remember I think it was very early 2000s. It was on Cartoon Network, and it was like 5-minute episodes of the Clone Wars in this very, very geometrically artistic kind of presentation.
remember it. We did a 2-part episode on it just recently.
Oh, all right. Sweet, sweet. So I rewatched it recently, and it was just, I mean, as a quick aside, the Jedi should have won very quickly based on that
Agreed.
whole
Based on
setup.
that one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was crazy. But I also feel like it was so focused on the adventure and the excitement of the war aspect that there was no focus on any kind of fallout that was there. But then
Yeah.
Clone Wars really dug a lot deeper into the different aspects of that, and it sort of feels like this book, this book set is kind of similar in that way, in digging more into the depth of just the war in itself and just the Star Wars component of the Clone Wars and such.
Yeah, all true. I agree. And I mean this made me want to go and watch the Clone Wars show, and I never want to watch the Clone Wars show. So maybe maybe this will finally be my time. Shall we move into some Oak of Arc, Steve? How do you feel about that?
I mean, it's really just the bridge killed it, man. I don't know. It's like trying to guess what a puzzle picture looks like with, like, I don't know, 60% of the
pieces
half
missing?
the pieces missing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I missed out.
Oh, sad.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got to agree with you on that. There's not really a plot point or something that happens that I'm just kind of like, bah. But I am sad about the abridgment because I feel like a lot of people are going to get it. And as we learned, there was a lot of holds on those Libby copies that we were all
Apparently.
chasing. So, but I hope that everybody can learn from Steve's negative example here. He's a cautionary tale when it comes to the Medstar Duology. Avoid the Libby audiobooks.
Yeah.
But if you're local to the David A. Howe Public Library, we do have these in paperback right on our sci-fi Star Wars shelf. So come in and check them out that way, or wherever your local library is, go and check them out because my enthusiasm for them remains even 20 years later. Amanda, did you have an Oak of Arc? Something in the book that you were like, Oak of Arc, I hated that.
I think the thing that bothered me the most was in the second book when Tolk was on the Medstar and the whole explosion happened and she comes back and her relationship with Joss is just really frosty, and he spends so much time being like, I don't get it. Why is she upset? And there was part of me that wanted to be like, talk to your uncle. Hey, he was on the ship, so he might be able to give more insight. But they had just also had a conversation about, is this going to be a good thing for you? So it seemed like an obvious element to me at the time of just feeling like, just talk to your uncle. Maybe you either it's your uncle's doing, or it's a case of he might have some more information to give. But I also realized that, in the fog of war and with all the ongoing stuff that was happening, it's not necessarily something that was immediately on his mind. It
Yeah.
just felt like they were kind of drawing that out a bit longer than it needed to be.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair criticism. It's kind of tropey. It's like a TV thing where
Yeah.
it's like, wait, don't go. And then the person goes and it's like, we'll just go after them and ask your question. So yeah, it was kind of a forced stumbling block, that only really works in fiction. Okay. Let's move on to our Ichiwawa moment. Steve, what about you? Give me something good. I need it.
I really like, and it's funny because it, again, probably didn't get talked about enough.
Breath. Okay.
So when Barris basically dosed herself with the Boda and kind of had like this, like her mind was open and right. So like Amanda, Nick and I have talked at great length, and I've complained plenty of times about like, all right, midichlorians, they can't decide. They can't decide what they are. Does it give you power? Does it just connect you more to the power? Like it's a big antenna. So the more you have, the more you are powerful, or the more you have, the more connection. But then that might mean like, you can have a lot of connection, but you're just not great at it. So then, I don't know. But what I thought was great was that the Boda kind of opened her mind and like heightened her powers to the point where like, what I was revealed to it is that she kind of experienced like raw force, like too much for her to handle. And it was, it was like raw unchecked force. So it was like, to me, it almost sounded like it wasn't really the dark side, but it wasn't really the light side. Specifically, how like the Jedi explained, like, the Force is,
I think it was just like potential. Like how she just saw so much, and it was like, how do you use it? Yeah,
really cool. Mentioned one time, never talked about again, and I was just like, dang, what the heck? Like, what about you, Amanda? What was your Chihuahua moment?
It's kind of a double in some ways. The one aspect, which is a bit more broad based, was that greater exploration of the clones as being people, and particularly honing in on Joss's ability to be able to see them as people and not just be like, all right, same old, no big deal here, and just bringing his humanity a bit more back into play, even though that complicated things a lot for him in the scope of the story and just added a lot more hardship in some ways. But I really appreciated that exploration. But I also kind of like the light moments of conversation between Uli and Barris that wasn't like fully developed, but it was interesting to see her having interactions with somebody outside the Jedi Order and having conversations not just about the Force, but kind of about life, and seeing her develop as a person, not just being like, I am a Jedi, always a Jedi. And it would have been interesting to see a bit more of her character development in that regard, as opposed to just the Force exploration that kind of occurs throughout the story. But yeah, I think those were my two.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't Joss, that they talk about at the beginning, he kind of is like, yeah, I'm just like a human mechanic. And so that's what I missed out on, because that's all I got of him. And there was really no true exploration of that. And so like,
no, they go pretty deep with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Cautionary tale. I'm telling you.
What? Wow.
That's what you are.
Yeah.
All right. I've got two, because one is really one's really an honorable mention. But Joss, when he's frustrated at one point, says, "Oh, that no good son of a Rach," and that's an Ewoks reference.
Oh yeah,
the Rach was a creature from, I think, the first season, maybe even first or second season of Ewoks, from that episode, The Rach, that Michael Reaves wrote. And it's just a reference to that, and it's just this throwaway thing about the creature from the Ewoks. And it's so funny that happened, because remember last year in Dark Plagueis, they mentioned Size from the Droids cartoons. So it's like, we didn't even do it on purpose. And the Droids and Ewoks show just follows Steve and I through our life. It stalks us like time.
So funny.
But okay, my real one, and this is kind of a spoiler, so if you haven't read the book, and I think we've pretty much spoiled it to death, but I really like how after everything that the people have gone through, the double crosses, the death, the continuing slaughter of the clones, the romance, all of this stuff, all to get their hands on this Boda. By the end, it's rendered worthless.
Yeah.
And like, to
ironic.
me, that is just, and it's really just kind of like a war, what is it good for kind of lesson. It's like, it's pretty bleak. It wasn't like, well, at least, they were able to get this stuff that saved so many lives. It's like, pack it up. Everything sucks. And I just feel like, again, it's very true to life. This whole, they're chasing after this thing. And by the end, it's like, what was it all for? So in a book that was about like dealing with the front lines of war, I felt like that was a really powerful message to end on.
That's a good one. Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah. Is the resource that we're fighting over really worth all of these lives?
Right.
Yeah. And then it became not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
There's your answer. Yeah. Wow.
Which I think, given everything that everybody went through, I mean, it really takes the wind out of your sails, but in kind of a satisfying way, I guess, because it's like, this all sucked. This whole thing sucked, and not like Steve read the abridgment and it sucked, but like, the concept of all the suffering and loss. I just felt like it really landed. So I still hold this up there as probably my favorite Clone Wars era novel. I mean, Karen Travis has like Hard Contact and some of the ones that are specifically about the clones. Those are great too, but I just think the fact that it's spread out over 2 books and this short story, I mean, I do think it just has time to breathe, and there's almost like a soap opera element to it that I like, and I didn't realize until researching this that the Coruscant Nights trilogy is really picking up right on the tails of this and following like Den onto another scene. And I kind of like the idea of Den and I-5 weaving through this duology and now this trilogy, but not really being the main characters, just kind of being a through line so that the story can move. So I'm definitely going to push these up on my. I know I've got 2 of them on my shelf right now, so I'm going to push those high on the list. So I'm excited about it. Amanda, did your happiness for these books was not dampened? You're still there?
Oh yeah, I think it's held pretty firm, and I mean I was glad about it because I know I've gone back and read some and been like, oi.
Yeah.
But these two definitely still held up really well. I mean, I think they've got a lot of good thematic elements that you can pull from any era, really, that are applicable to the world we live in at the moment. But it's also a really great just addition to the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, it is Star Wars Day, and I thought it would be fun to maybe give an additional Star Wars reference. So is there a show, a movie, a book, or something that you guys have done recently that you might recommend to the good people of Howe's Things in this Endorian Life? I've got one locked and loaded, and I didn't prepare you for the question, so I'll tell you about mine, and you guys can think about it. I'm going to recommend one called Padawan. This is by Kirsten White. It is a young adult novel, and it follows like a teenage Obi-Wan just as he's kind of like coming into having a little bit more responsibility. And it works really well. And I feel like this author really captures the Obi-Wan Kenobi you see both as Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor, and makes it kind of a believable younger version of him, even younger than we see in The Phantom Menace. And it works really well as a standalone. It's not like, oh, you got to read all these or you got to read all these. I mean, it's a pick it up, read it. There's a great audiobook, unabridged, and I think it's worth the read. So, what else we got, Steve? You got anything you want to recommend?
If you haven't read the Han Solo trilogy by A.C. Crispin, I highly recommend that. I feel like I've always recommended to everyone The Courtship of Princess Leia, because I freaking love it.
Last year.
I love that book. But A.C. Crispin does such a good job at a Han Solo and his early life, and literally the third book just rolls right into seconds before
it does.
I think the book ends with him being like, I gotta go meet with this old man and a boy.
Yes,
So it's like It's so good. It's so good how it just casually rolls in, and you're like, I remember finishing it the first time, and I was like, holy crap. What a wild ride. It was so good. And that's why, like, when the Solo movie came out, I was like, it'll never be
what happened.
It'll never be as good. It'll never be as good. AC Crispin nailed it,
No, that is a great. Anne Carol Crispin wrote those. She also has some great Star Trek books. Also.
Yeah.
So both sides. What about you, Amanda? What might you recommend?
So I was thinking about it, and like you'd mentioned the Hard Contact series, which is great, but there's one that kind of leads up to it a little bit, but in a bit of a peripheral. It's called Dark Rendezvous, which is it's a Clone Wars novel, and it's by Sean Stewart, and it's about, like, Dooku is sort of offering this opportunity for peace, but he wants to have this meet up with Yoda to kind of go over things. And while that's like the main premise, it also follows this Padawan who goes by Scout, and her force, like, we go back to the midichlorians thing, and her force abilities are extremely limited, and so she basically becomes a Padawan by the skin of her teeth. But it's her ingenuity that really kind of wins the day in that regard. So it's just interesting exploring her character and seeing her develop as a Padawan, and like she ends up going on the mission with Yoda, and so the interactions between them is fun. But also too, she's the Jedi that is in and out a bit in the Hard Contact series, and ends up having the relationship with one of the clones from the squad that's there. I can't remember his name right now, but
Cody.
It's just an interesting tie-in, kind of investigating what does it mean to be a Padawan if your force ability is really low. Like, how do you navigate being a Jedi in that context when the force is usually such a primary element of navigating the Jedi path, etc. But because of Yoda's kind of encouragement, she becomes a Padawan, even though most of the other Jedi are like, maybe we shouldn't. So it's it's an interesting exploration. I enjoyed the story. It's been a while since I've read it, so I say it with some hesitation of being like fully recommend, but I liked the concept of it. It was pretty cool.
This book came out in 2004, and an abridged audio, like the one that we just read, came out. But this was one of the ones that in 20, So 2004, there was an abridged audio, but this was one of the ones that got selected for a new unabridged version that just came out in January of 2024. Wow. Maybe a book for next year. Gonna toss it out there as an option. Because I have wanted to read this one. So, okay, well, geez. Let's see what we've got going on in the future. Next time for the Library Pod, we're going to be discussing George Orwell's Animal Farm, which I've never read before. I've read 1984, but I've never read Animal Farm. I've had it on my shelf forever, so we're going to be reading and discussing that over on But Have You Tried from the library. And right here on This Endorian Life, it's an episode that's decades in the making. In celebration of our 4-year podcasting anniversary, we're going to be covering Steve's beloved Thumb Wars. Thumb Wars.
I cannot wait. I'm
excited too because I've never seen it. And then after that, we have some exciting things planned. We're gonna go wild and start diving into some other forgotten 80s animated spin-offs like Back to the Future, The Dukes, Karate Kid. All bets are off.
Oh yeah,
we're going haywire.
There are spin-off cartoons that I'm sure so many people don't even know about. So many people out there are like, that was my favorite as a kid, and somebody else will be like, I didn't even know they even made that.
Never heard of it.
Yep. So
never heard of it.
Perfect genre for us to get into. I love it. I can't wait.
I like to think about somebody who watched the Back to the Future cartoon and then was like, oh, they were movies? Weird. Those are the people we're going to find.
Oh, man.
I'm looking forward to it. All right. Happy Star Wars Day, everybody.
Yeah.
Happy Star Wars Day.
Happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. I love it. Howe's Things was brought to you by the David A. Howe Public Library. You can find all of the library's podcasts at soundcloud.com/allthebooks. This Endorian Life was brought to you by the Radio Meanwhile Network. Be sure to check out some of the other shows on the network like 9021 Here We Go or previously on X-Men. Please rate, subscribe, and share this show wherever you get your podcasts.